Yeah. And we're live.
Obstacles.
A little struggle getting here, but we're here.
All
So,
right. Well, I was thinking, how do we introduce our podcast?
well, it's a good question, considering it's the first episode.
Yeah. Episode
Uh,
number one.
welcome. Um, well, we could start off by saying a little bit about ourselves.
Okay.
If you'd like to go first, Mr. Keith.
Oh,
Had to put you
I
on the
see,
spot
I
there.
see what you did there. I see what you did
Hey, I mean,
there.
I want to avoid the first go around.
I'm having flashbacks of being in class,
Mm,
and all right, we're gonna go around the room.
Keith.
All right, I'm going first. Um, all right. My name is Keith, and I guess like the most relevant and current things about me is I go to Towson University, studying psychology, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I feel like these podcasts are one of those things that I can't imagine not wanting to do, or like at least seeing, you know, what happens as a byproduct of like doing the podcast, right? And
Mhm.
yeah, all the conversations that I have with you and other people about this kind of information, um, I don't know, man, just inspires me, motivates me. So it's nice to do these podcasts.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah, that's my intro. If you haven't, I guess that was a terrible intro. Do you have any like? Should I be stating more facts?
No,
I'm
dude, I think
I'm 33 years old.
more. Where
Short,
do you live? Give us
white,
the address.
Italian. There's some facts for the world.
All right. Well, thank you for starting us off, sir. I look forward to diving into this with you.
Hmm.
It's about time we did this.
Yeah.
And so, my name is Tom, and like Keith, well, I actually just finished undergraduate at a Salisbury University. I was studying biology, psychology, and a little bit of chemistry and cognitive science. Um, and now it's that big what's next, and um, the conversations that we'll be having are things that we've always done, and just what I'm very passionate about, exploring ideas, and not just any ideas, ideas that are pragmatic and you can take and implement and see changes in your life for the better, and hopefully for the better of the people that you care about. And so my goal here is to have a great time and to share what we talk about, and because I think that I've personally have found great value, and especially talking to Keith often, and I just hope that somebody else can find the value in that. And so we'll see where that goes. Thank you for tuning in.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I love that. And just yeah, I don't know, something before we get started, just the idea of like not just like the podcast not just for us. I think it's in the same way like we seek out podcasts for information, right? And it's just being exposed to something, just it can just be one idea. Can be a game changer. So again, hopefully, you know, we're able to offer that to whatever audience tunes in.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, so might as well get into the content. This is going to be part of a series of reflections on. We're actually doing two different books at the moment. Jordan Peterson's uh, Beyond Order 12 More Rules for Life. And we're also doing um, Carl Jung's Modern Man in Search of Soul. And the layout of how we're doing these reflections is each week we're going to dive through a chapter and on our own, and then at the end of the week we're going to get together like we are right now, and we're going to dive into it, reflect on it, and talk about what we got out of it, and synthesize each other's perspectives, maybe promote some opposing arguments and to just play with these ideas. And in the past, specifically Peterson has been a very powerful influence on my life with his YouTube lectures that he posts. I've been following him for quite some time, so it is an honor to dive through this book.
Let's do it.
All
Let's do
right.
it.
So, rule one is do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievement. So, you want to start us off with what you kind of first came across as
Yeah.
you were reading?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like for starters, like Jordan Peterson has so much to say. Um, and with each little like section within the chapter, it's hard not to stop and think about um, how accurate he is in just describing um, just kind of like for me it's like how life works, right? It's like he gets to the deepest layer and kind of gives you this um kind of like the things that are underlying, like how do I describe this? There's like really like I have no words today. There's like things that just aren't as important in life that I feel like we attach ourselves to. And then like if you think philosophically, which I think he does, and like you go deeper and deeper and you get to the heart of the meaning of what it is you're actually experiencing, which again could be both philosophical and psychological. He just he gets to it, right? He goes there. And each section kind of offers a little bit of that, but the whole chapter as a whole, again, he brings it all together. Um, and yeah, I guess I'll just start with like the first section, um, loneliness and confusion. And he really just emphasizes this importance of communication and the value of interpersonal relationships. And he even makes the claims that because we live in a social world, and if you think about it, we're only becoming more social with technology and our the access that we have to people. We can talk to someone across the globe through a computer, through Zoom, like we're doing right now. Um, and he says, basically trying to be a part of that social world is a way to improve and manage your mental health. So that was one of the first things that stood out. And it just makes me reflect and ask questions like, when I'm not being social, when I'm, being a hermit and I'm isolating myself and I'm, withdrawing from the world. Um, Not that there's not sometimes that might be necessary, but when it becomes a way of life, are you better for it or are you worse? And I feel like that's one of the first questions I just want to throw out there. And I feel like by asking you and us talking about this chapter in our own lives, maybe people that are listening can ask themselves about their social lives. And again, what are their behaviors? What are their patterns? And when they're not hanging out with people and not, you know, expressing love and trying to get along with one another, how are they feeling? What is their life like at that point when they're really not trying to be a part of something that you really can't avoid, which is how social we are.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing that kind of stood
Yeah.
out to me.
Oh no, I love it. He definitely, as usual, have my mind uh, going all over the place. Great ways. But the first thing that I wanted to do is actually provide some background to, you could say, the social, the deep social proclivity that we have as a species, and not just us. Um, just about, I, arguably, you could probably say most of life on Earth. And to take it back to his first book, Peterson's first book, and when and various lectures where he's talked about lobsters and how um, lobsters engage in social interactions in regards to dominance disputes of one way or another. And they have very complex stages of interaction. They don't just go and try and tear each other's limbs apart. But to make it short and sweet, if a lobster loses, it it won't be as likely to stand up for itself and fight for something of necessity, such as maybe a shelter, a mate, food. These are all things that uh, create um, dominance disputes among creatures. And so you could say the lobster kind of becomes depressed. And if you give that lobster SSRI, or a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, it will, which are commonly given to people who have depressants, it's an antidepressant, it will get back up and go fight again. So what that's showing is that the neurochemistry of crustaceans, who are some of the oldest of our ancestors, um, also exhibit same qualities as we have in one way or another. So we evolved, our nervous systems have in a way evolved solely based on interaction with each other. And as we've evolutionarily climbed, those complexities of our input complexities are just continuously increased to where we have these huge structures of abstract hierarchy, social hierarchies, and how we function in the world. Um, and those can be a little, you could say, suppressing at times. And where Keith, what you were saying is that, um, for me at least, I find myself needing to pull away from my social environment so that I could kind of recalibrate my value system and my orientation and what I want to achieve with my life. Because the thing is being around people all the time, at least what I've noticed from my experience, is that it is, I kind of meld into their value system, or there's a melding of value systems, and there's not as much control over that as you might otherwise think, at least from my experience. So it's like, and that's where you're saying, like, asking the questions is this social situation that I'm in at the moment benefiting me or hindering me? And I think a large part of it's unconscious, and it's very hard to kind of, and there are certainly extremes of situations where being around certain people, you can easily probably tell whether that's in your best interest or not. But for the most part, I haven't really been able to effectively realign myself with my goals and, I guess, what I believe is my purpose, uh, without taking a period of isolation. And with that, I also gained very deep gratitude for the social game. And I don't think nobody can stay in isolation forever, as we are deeply social. But I think
Yeah.
it's a very individual thing.
Well, I think that's like what he's saying too, is that you can't isolate yourself from the world and expect
Mm-hmm.
pretty much to remain sane. Um, and he uses again, like the client in the very beginning of the book, this person that um, had a very troubled past and didn't trust people. So kind of experienced that. And then like his relationship with um, Jordan Peterson in therapy, he was encouraged to, go out and do things and make friends. And again, kind of changed his life around. Um, so yeah, and you were hitting on a few things. I almost wish I had like someone taking notes so I could go back to them.
Oh, we'll have it recorded.
Well, you said something about values, losing yourself to other people's values. That I want to like tweeze out real quick because I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really important. I think that's something where I think it occurs more often than not, if especially if you don't have a strong value system. So you're and like another thing too is like you were talking about being around people a lot and kind of it being like this unconscious thing that when this process occurs. And for me it's yeah, because I feel like a lot of us kind of have these day-to-day tasks, right? Like especially older adults, like we have a job to go to. So you already have a list of things to do. Like if you think about it this way, your plate is already kind of full with just the things that you have to do. And now that people are a part of that world, you go and you expect to achieve what it is that, your job requires of you. But then along the way, you have all these people talking to you. kind of like, starting communication and talking about things that you just couldn't have predicted. And in those moments, you don't get to just take yourself out of it and go, how do I want to react to this? You just kind of like, probably unconsciously more than anything, just react to it in the situation. And I think like that happens a lot. And I think that's why taking the time for yourself to understand what your values really are will kind of determine how you do react in that situation. And I think if you don't have any values yourself, you can easily get lost in other people's value systems, right?
Hmm.
And the thing is like, I don't even think people are like, I think the same way that like you get lost in it, I don't think people are out there manipulating people and saying like, I hope people see it my way or this and that. But I think if someone doesn't put up a fight and there's no dispute or at least civil discourse where you're debating those values like me and you do, um, it is easy to get lost in that. And I think one of the cool things is like we're talking about getting away from kind of social interaction to figure some of those things out. But I also think the beauty of like what me and you do is we discuss values together and we allow ourselves to kind of do that without you being alone, right? Like a lot of the things that we talk about, we share these ideas and we kind of really try to understand both perspectives instead of we hang out and then we part ways
Hmm.
and then it's like I figure out for myself and it's like you're here with me, which is another part of this chapter is we're talking together and then you're helping me see like he talks about pointing to something. So like if you're pointing to something that you think is a value and I'm pointing to something I think of a value, I'm not alone thinking about why my reason is right or why my value is better than yours. We're discussing it together and trying to figure out, like you said, what's what's something that transcends your value, my value, and we make a new value that's even better. We are improving, you know what I mean? Not by
Hmm.
isolating ourselves, but by collaborating.
Oh, yes. And I want to build off of that with one more thing in the beginning. Um, with that initial client that he had talked about, and what Peterson said he found himself doing for the most part was, as he said, to increasingly hold his tongue and listen. And
Peterson did that as
yeah,
the therapist.
Peterson said that did that as the therapist.
Right.
And there's a well, as Carl Rogers would say, there's deep value in listening and truly listening, not listening to respond, but listening to understand. And
How dare you bring up other psychologists? How dare you?
well, he'll be all right.
Now,
Sorry, Peterson.
now you just threw like a whole bunch of stuff in my head.
Yeah, now we're bringing Rogers into the game. Better get ready for it, Keith.
That's what it's all
Um,
about, though. I love
no,
it.
yeah, well, that is, it's we're
Making
all, well, that's what we've all been doing intellectually in that way, is building bridges for each other to walk across, connecting bridges to each other to explore more territory and understand um, more about our situation, and how to move through it with minimal suffering and a lot of meaning. And listening is, for at least it seems like Peterson's client that he's talking about, who's just had a extremely rough time of it, and has gotten to the point where he's began to just kind of curse the world, so to speak, as a place of tyranny, for lack of a better word. Um, when you listen to somebody in a genuine way, it almost gives them the ability to kind of observe themselves speak by as you're giving feedback. And like you said, like, we are listening to each other intently to truly understand what the other person is saying, because it's hard, it can be hard to understand what someone's saying. And I feel like you said, as we're going through the social world, having your values is very important, because these people, it's, from my experience, it's been very unlikely that someone's going to listen to what I say like the way that you listen to me, Keith, because I'm not worried about this just judgment straight off the bat. and very more what they have to say next has nothing to do with what I said, but something about themselves in one way, shape, or form, or their perspective. But yeah, power of listening. It's a
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah, one thing I want to throw in there real quick is you just made me think about this idea of like an expectation to be understood. And it's almost like again, everything that I feel like I'm expressing in some way, shape, or form has manifested personally, right? And it's like sometimes I prefer not to be social because the hard work that you have to put in to be understood is doing exactly like what we're doing. It's thinking about the words that you want to use, the things that you've experienced, and like kind of putting that all together for someone else, right? But when you're alone, you don't even have to speak to yourself. You just think it and you understand yourself. But like the thing is it's not that easy to do with the rest of the world, right? So you have to work at being able to communicate
Mm-hmm.
better, to be able to articulate very complex ideas that we are all capable of creating. And I think it's like this expectation that like, oh man, they don't understand me when I just, maybe I phrase a sentence one way and it's like they didn't understand me. I'm giving up. And it's like, well, that's not the answer. Like maybe you could phrase it better, And if you can work on your communication and then everyone understands each other better, well, then guess what? You've just improved your social, interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And you've honestly improved your just everything, like
Mm-hmm.
just and at the core of it, I feel like that's always the goal is to make things better. But it's almost like the easy route is to not do it, not communicate those ideas, if you're not understood right away. But if you just put in a little bit of the work, it actually helps in the long run. Like it's like that idea of like short term versus long term investment. Um, and the long term investment is the payoff.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, I mean, you hit it right on the head because, like what this is what it's about. Like, there's so much meaning that can be found in connecting with other people,
Mm-hmm.
and just like what we've been talking about, like it may seem daunting at first, to kind of step out of your comfort zone and interact with somebody. And, one little tactic that can be used to try and understand somebody if you're not sure if you understood what they said, but to summarize what you think they said in not a in a curious in a with an attitude of curiosity rather than any kind of like attack or anything like that. But and you'll find that you know they'll correct you. And I feel like we have a lot of arguments and with different people, and we could be. I see it with my sisters all the time. They're arguing about something with each other, and they're both arguing about something different. And they're not talking about the same thing, and they're both getting angry because they can't solve the problem, but they're on two different levels of analysis. And it's
Right.
like, but if you have that kind of reciprocity, if you try and summarize what the other person's going to say, well, first of all, they can hear themselves if you got it, and they can reflect a little bit on what they said.
You have to be
And
open to listening
well, yes,
in the
but
first place. Like,
you can at least understand what they said
yeah.
better, or
Yeah.
no, if you don't have it correct.
Yeah. But I feel like, again, that inability to just sit back and listen, right? Like bite your tongue, like Peterson was doing. It's like
Mhm.
where you're not going to get anywhere, right? Because you already have it in your mind that you're right. So there's no point in hearing what the other person has to say. So,
Exactly, and sometimes you just gotta accept it, and don't allow that to affect the rest of your day.
mm-hmm.
And that brings us back to the value system, to finding those values, um and seeing that as if like a little bug just like hit you for a second. Oh, it's gone. You forget about it 5 minutes later.
Did you say bug? Like
Yeah,
cicada?
like
Like a
a
cicada?
cicada.
Damn
Oh, damn, I
cicadas.
wish I had it recording when you were going off about the cicadas in the beginning. Mans can't even go outside to read a book these days.
I'm glad that we have this on record, though, that we're dealing with these cicadas because it only happens once every 17 years.
It's
But
true.
man, they're a pain in the ass.
I think
And
it's
it's
seven
like
years.
my thing is, I know they're completely harmless, but I'm trying to read and eat breakfast outside, and you just can't do that when you're trying to dodge these Little bastards.
Hey, if you can dodge a cicada, you can dodge a ball. Did you ever see the movie Dodgeball?
Yeah. It's been a while, but I've seen it.
Good one.
It is.
Um, all right. Well, I guess he kind of. I mean, trying to see how
Can
Peterson
I
ends this
can I
section.
say something real quick? This was
Yeah,
like a side note that I wrote down.
for sure.
And it like I'm also like reading existential stuff right now.
Mm,
So just loneliness as a psychological phenomenon and um just this idea that like we all have to deal with the fact that we are alone in the sense like we're in our own body. No one else can experience what we are experiencing the way that we experience it, right?
mm,
Um, and just like basing off like what he said about his client and like kind of just again withdrawing from life. Like I just feel like that's something that we all again experience at one point or another and in varying degrees. And it's like I guess because like we're talking and if there was an audience that, wanted to listen to this, just like just knowing that we're talking about, the fact that we live in a social world, yet we experience this isolation, right? And this loneliness. And it's like just reach out to people, right? Like don't don't go the other way with it and just retreat from the world. Like you have the world and just, just reach out when that idea or like that feeling of loneliness is really just overwhelming you. Like, I feel like that's one thing where it's almost like I don't like saying that I have an answer or that like it is the answer, but it's like more often than not, just reaching out to somebody and just talking to someone, just
mhm,
expressing something along the lines of like, yeah, I'm in a funk. Like, that's all you have to say. And like, someone's going to be there for you. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like that's the thing is like sometimes we just don't even reach out, when we
mhm.
experience that type of loneliness. And I can imagine, this guy that he's talking about definitely had like a, history and just a lot of events that kind of made him the way that he was, which,
It's a pretty
that's
rough
that
one, man.
yeah, like that's going to be for some people and some people aren't going to have that many, but they're still maybe going to come across that and just again, I just think again the value of understanding our social world has so many benefits to it, and even if it's just that someone someone can be there to support you just to kind of just be there if you're willing to express that you feel that at any point, you know what I mean?
hmm I also wanted to say, uh, put a couple more cents in the piggy bank. Um,
I like it.
um, ones that like you're saying, like reach out to somebody. Maybe it's a social group that's been established for something like that. There are various mental health hotlines or even networks online that you can at least start, even if you have like some fear of social interaction or meeting new people. It's like it might be easier to just start online. I mean,
Hmm.
it is something, and it can move you a little bit closer. And another thing is that just because one person's not open to it the first time you do it, maybe your chances are 1 in 10 of finding someone. Well, if you ask 10 people, there you go, you got one. It's like, so
Hmm.
there's an aspect of not folding
Hmm.
on on the first couple reactions if they're negative.
Right.
And a couple other things that I wanted to say is that sleeplessness increases loneliness by a substantial margin. And when you are lonely, um, oh, maybe this might be counterproductive, but it's fact. If you're lonely and when you interact with other people, you can you can almost make them feel lonely. There's kind of a viral loneliness element, which is interesting, to say the least. But yes, good sleep can prevent loneliness. Loneliness is also worse for your health than obesity on some measures. But so that's why. But it's also easy to alleviate. It's something that's in your control and in your power. So,
Yeah.
you know, be the change. We love
I
it.
feel like we need to have a separate episode for just sleep So let's
We're gonna need to have multiple episodes for sleep.
yeah, let's reserve that
Well,
one.
we'll leave that. We'll leave
But I
that.
love that because I'm
Got my thoughts going there. Wow, I think we've hit that section pretty hard.
no, we did. We did. Yeah, we're definitely not going to be able to talk about all of this.
Oh no,
But
not at all. At that rate, we'll be looking at like 3 hours. Um, we got next. Mm,
so we did kind of like I definitely talked about like pointing to something because that kind of like
mhm,
just discusses like his idea of like values. And I think like just one of the quick things just to throw out there, you know, he's talking about how we kind of create this idea of what has value. And since Jordan Peterson is obviously arguing for social institutions being an integral part of just, our society and just the way that we operate and, our psychological health and why they're so important, when you're creating these values, you want to consider the broader world, right? Like you want to consider how does this benefit everyone. And I think that's again just another element just to identify and recognize so we can like move through some of these sections. Like that's basically I feel like what he lays out. And I feel like if you had anything to add to that, you can.
can you repeat that one more time? What
About
you
the
said?
values.
Yeah.
Yeah, just saying he's talking about pointing to things and he brings up, like a baby starts to point at stuff. And they when they point at stuff, they also look around to see if you're looking at what they're pointing
Mhm.
at. And if you don't pay them attention, then they don't really point at it anymore. They're like that doesn't kind of have value to them.
Right.
So when he's talking about
We did hit on
as
that.
we mature and we develop, we have this understanding of what has value
Mhm,
because we also understand that the people around us see things as valuable just as well. And
mhm,
then he also differentiates like you have these fundamental things of value, which are, you know, food,
mhm,
water, all those, biological necessities that are going to keep you alive. So you have to value those. So
mhm.
those are obviously a part of the social institutions. So it's like a lot of these things are created because they provide those things for us. And that's why, again, I guess like at the heart of his argument in this chapter, he's like saying, don't be so quick to, think that you can tear these social institutions down and that everything's going to be fine. Like it will turn to chaos because all of a sudden, if you destroy these institutions that have been evolving over, extended periods of time, well, then all of a sudden you might not be feeding a certain population. You might not be providing health
Mhm.
benefits or services to another
Right.
population because you had this, ridiculous idea that it just wasn't necessary. So again, the value that is kind of in these social institutions is something that's generally agreed upon too. And I think
Mhm,
that's again at the heart of the chapter. And like I was
mhm.
saying, we can kind of just breeze through those
Oh yeah.
sections
Um,
just by talking about that.
yeah. There's a point I wanted to make, and like you said, it's like we shouldn't be so quick to tear down these systems, various structures that we have in place that meet our supplies sometimes, and they tilt towards tyranny and do some damage, but at the same time, they're likely still providing a fundamental necessity of some kind. But there's a distinction that I wanted to make between like because like you said, and I mean we'll probably get into this soon with furthering sections, but maybe a segue is that to distinguish between destroying to destroy, that stems from a kind of hatred and resentment towards something,
Mm-hmm.
a kind of social structure or societal element, and um, you know, destroying to reconstruct. But I don't really want to use the word destroying there. It's kind of like to I guess you could just say, to reconstruct something in a more
Yes.
benevolent way, but
Yeah,
like not
or
just
like
destroying for the sake of destroying.
right.
But yeah, like to improve, to go to improve something, um, out of benevolence, not out of resentment. And I think that the underlying emotions there are what drives the, or will be what drives the action of how it's carried out. Um, but yes,
Well,
constructive criticism.
kind of like what you're talking about. He has a section on. I'm trying to find it real quick. Personality as hierarchy, capacity for transformation, but I also think it's the other one, necessity of balance. So that's where he starts
Ah,
talking about
yes.
kind of what you're talking about, where he talks about
That's probably more concluding.
conservatism, and he also talks about what's the other one, creative
Creative,
something.
like innovation.
Yeah, and basically saying that people kind of embody these characteristics. Um, so you have people that are more conservative, and you have people that are more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to use the word liberal because he uses the word like
Open.
creative, yeah, and like
Yeah,
open
it's
to
like
change,
creative,
right?
innovative.
Right.
Yeah.
And the point is like, yeah, you can look at that politically, but I don't want to do that right
I
now.
don't think it necessarily, like you could say the policity of it. It took a little bit, but the publicity of it is like an outgrowth of it.
Yes, I agree.
Like
I agree.
this is we're talking about temperament,
Right,
and
right,
just you could say predispositions to specific behavioral responses to the environment.
right. And I think what he points out and what you kind of like the point that you brought us to, which again summarizes this chapter beautifully, is that um people tend to be more conservative and other people tend to be more open to change. And it takes both of those forces interacting with one another to allow these social institutions to evolve over time. And basically, what he says is they have evolved over time. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. There's a lot of conflict along the way. But the point is, and like the conflict, like this is something important too. It's like if people are too conservative, and like what you said, it's like all of a sudden you're trying to cling to this idea of this institution is providing everything that needs to and it doesn't need to change.
Mhm.
But that idea kind of starts to take over, and you have no room for growth and development and improvement, and you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. Like let's just say it's, even though it's providing these services, it's really profitable, but then it's profitable to the point that you're taking advantage of people, and you don't want to change it because you're making so much money. Well, now that's a problem, right? And that's where the other side comes in and says, we need to make some changes.
Mhm.
And then you have the conflict as those forces are butting heads. But when those forces are operating together, and you have this idea of like people that are conservative, they understand the stability and the durability of these institutions. And then these people that come in and say, well, here are some things that we could change, and you combine those, then you get this evolving,
Mhm.
I guess, for the sake of the context, social institution will improve over time and evolve. So, yeah, and those are just, again, really deep ideas that, again, I think reflect, like you said, temperament and people's personalities that are the contributors to all these social institutions that we have, that we have access to, and that are,
Mhm.
you know, a thing.
I want to bring Piaget in right now, but I won't. It's kind of off topic, but kind of another time.
Yeah, I mean, I like what are some things that stood out to you?
Well, one thing that I had fun thinking about for a little bit is actually um, in regards to, well, how we see and how we perceive and categorize the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like here, I'll read one of the a quote that I underlined from him. He said, "To name something is not only to make it shine forth against the infinite background of potentiality of potentially nameable things, but to group and to categorize it simultaneously with many other phenomena of its broad utility or significance." So, like when I was thinking about that, I guess kind of the way that I went with that is that, um, at like words or language kind of brings things into existence in a way or another, and how we create. It's a very useful thing, but at the same time, it's like, uh, I feel like there can be a kind of rigidity that comes with that, where you say you confine yourself to a label, to a word that you see yourself, and you try to become that, but that's just in the end kind of a word. It's like it's that cannot possibly encapsulate what you are. But like if you strive for success, so to speak, success is supposed to categorize all these things, and I feel like there can it can limit, like it benefits us by not allow by enabling us to navigate through the world, because our values is what's going to, based on our values is how we're going to perceive and what's going to kind of stand out to us, so to speak. But like it's like this idea of, to take it into, like he talked about restaurant workers for an example. It's like to perceive only the negativity in your job or something along those lines, or the lack of opportunity that presents itself to you. And so you fail to see all of the opportunity that's standing right in front of you, because you've trapped yourself in a perceptual categorization of one that is does not hold any opportunity, or
Mhm.
does not hold any positivity. So yeah, just wanted to,
So
that
like
had me thinking.
deep down, would you say like when we're talking about values, like this is something I'm trying to like make sense out of this. I don't know if there's something here,
That's
but
kind of all over the place there.
if the server is someone that's not, taking advantage of opportunity, they're not working hard, they're looking and perceiving all these negative aspects of their job, they're looking at it as a chore, like is it safe to say that either one, they haven't created any values for themselves that gives them some sort of like motivation or direction, or are their values actually just values that motivate them to see things negatively? It's almost like your value in itself is inherently negative, like you're looking at the world with
Well,
this negative perspective, and again, I don't know if that implies a lack
the,
of values, or if that implies that the value itself just is not one that, again, on a large scale, a lot of other people could look at that person and say, you're not creating anything for yourself. You're stuck in the cycle. And whatever it is that you're pointing at, the values that you are, experiencing or creating, they're not getting you anywhere. So how valuable are they?
hmm,
You know what I mean?
yeah, uh, that made me think of first that, like, value that person could hold was that is kind of a freedom from responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to a degree. Because I mean, I think value and meaning. Well, Peterson, I don't really know. I don't think he really mentioned it in this chapter, but one thing that he puts forth is that value and meaning, or maybe more meaning, I think there's relatively interchangeable, but is attached to responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, a state of kind of like responsibility lessness bliss, where, like, I could
By
just sit
avoiding it.
here and play video games all day,
Right.
and then that's like
You're
hedonism
you're
to a
free
degree.
to do so. You're free
Yeah,
to do that. But where
when
does
you
it
don't take
but
responsibility.
where does it get you?
Well, it doesn't get you anywhere. It just,
Right.
you just get these fleeting cycles of pleasure and anxiety, and
Okay.
I think guilt to a degree too, that you're not living up to what you know that you could do. Maybe you don't
Right.
know that. Maybe you just need to be told that. There are people like that too,
But
who
the
just
whole
don't know that
time
they could go do that.
the whole time you're thinking those things, like you just gave like a clear picture of what someone playing video games, the conclusions that they might come to when they realize that they've been playing for too long.
Yeah,
But
'cause
you're
I've been
only you're only able to make those conclusions because you live in a social world. Like,
yes.
because you compare, like you do compare yourself, but you identify with the hierarchy that he describes without really realizing that you are.
Uh,
That's where the
that's how
Peterson
deep
blows
it
my mind.
is.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. You
because
don't
these are
even
things we've
realize that you're
always been doing,
right.
but he just articulates it, and it's like, oh, there, that's what you've always been doing, but you just didn't know that that's what you were doing.
Right. And
And then
that's
he brings it forth into existence
mhm.
out of the sea of infinite possibility of what you are.
Expand your awareness. Boom.
Yeah, you
That's
know what
it.
I'm gonna
I'm
do
done.
after
I'm
this?
knocking the mic over, podcast over.
Well, I was about to say I'm gonna go play some video games. I'll talk to you later. I got work today too. I was like, this video game sounds more entertainable.
Oh man. Yeah, no, that was good. I feel like again, just I love talking about this because sometimes I always have this. I don't know if anyone else ever experiences this, but just feeling like you read something, or I'm in school, so like I finish a class or I finish the semester, and I'm like, what did I really learn? And it's like, but it takes having, for me personally, takes having these conversations. Like, you don't need to do a podcast to do this. Just sit down with a friend that is, again, is curious about the world and wants to share ideas. And all of a sudden, you realize everything that you've read, um, it just it is a part of you. And whether you can articulate that with, precision and accuracy at the moment, just having the communication allows you to develop that skill. And talking about this chapter with you, even coming into this morning, I don't know if I have anything to talk about. I don't know if I remember the chapter. I read it
You
like 2 days ago. I'm like,
and me
do I
both,
even
man.
yeah, like do I even remember what Peterson said? And once you just have these ideas and these concepts, and once you start connecting all of them, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he said this, and oh yeah, we just broke down hierarchies and
Hmm.
values, and it's like, yeah, it's all there, and it's but yeah, I don't know, just sharing that. It's just a really cool thing that I experienced.
I love it.
Yeah.
Me 1 second, and we're back. Pee break.
Pee break.
gotta gotta give in to the biological necessities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Where do you wanna
Um, well, I don't think because we have the like we were just talking about big part on evolution and how it relates. We could talk about the games though, like kind of you could say
the social games that we
the
all play?
social games. Yeah, we could kind of dive into the intricacies of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let you start it off.
Mm, I
What's
saw
on
that coming.
your mind about that? Because I know I
um,
feel like I actually had a friend that just kind of talked about that one day that dated me, that just kind of like opened up about it, and he was like, man, he's like, sometimes I'm so aware of these games that we all play with each other, and I'm like, well, that's a deep truth right there. Like it's like, and again, I think this goes back to everything that Peterson's kind of bringing up, is like this idea of values, what we value, and how that kind of structures the game that we all play. And depending on, I would say, like the
ooh,
environment that we're in, or the social institution that we're a part of, there are these games and there are these rules, and you learn the rules. And you can't, I guess a part of that is, you can't really expect to transcend any rule or create a rule, that's like an evolving thing from it, or like something for yourself, until you've understood the game first, right? And I think that's where
mhm,
like some of the issues, some of the conflict comes in, that he kind of like really points out, is sometimes people try to create rules for themselves, but they don't even have a clear understanding of the current rules, and they're not even skilled within the environment that they find themselves. So the argument is basically, where do you feel like you're established that you can do this? You know what I mean? Like that you can just kind of, and that's where I think, don't denigrate social institutions, is someone denigrates a social institution when they think that they're above it without even understanding it. That's the problem.
mhm.
But yeah, and again, I just think that coincides with this idea of games, because they're all built up on, it's all games and rules.
There's a Zen twist on this, is whether you take the games too seriously or not.
Yeah.
Seriousness with the games can creates anxiety and suffering from Zen perspective. But it's not that they're not sincere though.
Yeah. Well,
Let's dive in. I got him.
this is what I have to think about. I'm like, brain hurts, brain overload, malfunctioning. That's like it's sometimes like
It's like to lose the playfulness of the
sometimes
game.
those questions in like Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, it's like
That's what
it's
they're
not even
meant to do.
it's not even fair because it makes you question why it's a game in the first place, right?
Well, yeah,
It's
that's
like, but for me, coming from a place of uh, existential thought is, well, because we decided that it means something to us,
exactly. Like I said,
and
sincerity is all there.
right. And I think that question's more valuable to someone that doesn't understand their place in the games, that doesn't understand that there are games, right? Like someone with very limited awareness of
Hmm.
just how things actually operate. And yeah, I don't know, but it's definitely good. I think it's a good way to get people to think about stuff.
Well, we can kind of start it out like we have to think about like here's another thing like I guess you could say Piaget is kind of like the one who, um, or I mean, people call him a developmental psychologist, but Peterson sees him as a developmental epistemologist, or like study of knowledge and how it evolves. Um, and what he kind of, his perspective, this might be a little tangled up. I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it. His perspective is kind of like, um, because as we continue to learn, knowledge is not necessarily a fixed thing. And as we accumulate knowledge, part of that accumulation is an integration of new information and then a synthesis and an evolution of what you had already known. Or at
Mm-hmm.
least if we identify like that, then we're seeing ourselves, I guess you could almost say it's more in accordance with like uh, Taoist sense of like going with the flow of knowledge and information.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you identify with yourself as a creature who evolves and adapts to change and continuously, then you don't identify yourself with what you are now. And there's a idea in that, and by trying to stay identified with what you are at this moment creates um, anxiety to change, and I feel like some kind of existential angst that is kind of just pervasive in your character. Um,
Yeah, I feel like
but
resistance is a good way to
yeah,
talk
it's a
about that
great.
too.
Hmm.
Resistance to change.
But so the thing that we've been doing, but it hasn't been articulated, is that we've had these interactions with each other, and I guess Peterson identifies the goal, or Piaget identified as the goal, is like to not win at the game in and of itself in any way necessary, but winning in in more of a metaphysical sense, or a metaphysical sense, or meta sense, is to win so that you continue to play the game and are invited to play the set of games across time. And like this is kind of bringing it back a little bit, but like success, like you could say like I've succeeded in graduating undergrad. Now, if I just identify with that and stick with that, then I feel like it creates resistance or a kind of state of stagnation in what I'm going to do next. Where success to me, how I see it, is kind of just like a continuous state of evolution and change of character and who I become in the process of um, playing these games. Some are hard, some are easy, and that depends on the level of expertise that you have when entering one. And Peterson, we can dive into that later, like after this, which is the archetype of the fool. Um, but to start us off, like Jaak Panksepp's effective neuroscientist who looked at rats and how they interacted with each other He basically developed the play circuit. Um, and mammals, which was that like dogs, for example. It's like if you have a dog and you can play with the dog and it's not going to bite you to tear your throat out or something. It's going to you can like I have two dogs and I like play slap them and stuff like that, and they'll try and bite my hand, but they won't bite hard, and it's there, and you see it comes. Mice have the same thing, and actually by not engaging in that, the mice become at a young age, starting at a young age, they become antisocial and isolated, and they are at risk for, you could say, all cause mortality, most likely, a variety of different things. But they will actually, you can measure how bad the mice want to play by attaching them to like a spring, and you measure the resistance that they create on trying to go play with the other mice by their pull, on how hard they pull the spring. And that's what he did. And so the game aspect that emerges in mice, now you could say they're not talking about it, it's completely embodied. So you could say that knowledge is kind of embodied physically before it is articulated and brought into conscious awareness. And the game is the conscious articulation of what we've been doing for millions of years. And that is, so you have if a mouse is, at least 10% or bigger than another mouse, then they're likely to win. Probably, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think it's like 90% to 100% of the time. However, after dominance is declared in the first round of play fighting with the mice, the subordinate, the one that lost, is the one that initiates play. And you see it with chimps too. They kind of like, the smaller chimps will kind of like throw rocks or like irritate the bigger ones. Like I have little cousins and siblings who do the same thing to me. They like hit me with a pillow or something and try and get me to like go like
Yeah.
play wrestle with them or throw them into the cushions or something.
Right.
Um, but if and so the interesting thing that's come and the reciprocity of it is that if the bigger mouse does not let the smaller one win, um, like somewhere between 30 to 40% of the time, it will stop initiating play. And so the bigger mouse is then losing, even though it won, because it's not getting invited back to the set of Ross games. And so you see an embodied morality emerge out of um, non-articulated behavior in mice and mammals, and so that seems to be where the game stems from. And so that's what, I mean, Peterson said it in this book. When you tell, like, I mean, my parents told it to me all the time. I don't remember, what's that cliche saying? Um,
It's not
it's
about
not how you play. It's not whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game,
right.
so that you're invited back to play again. Because in the end, that's what it's all about.
Right. And that again says a lot about your character and who you are and not letting the game get the best of you. I think because again, you have other like psychologists, personality theorists that, you know, their theory is stemmed on this idea of competitiveness too. I think it was like Karen Horney and like
Mm-hmm.
just that a lot of, especially in Western societies, a lot of the problems that we have, you know, our neurotic behavior is based on this idea that we're competitive. We're so competitive that when we're not winning, that's a problem. So then when we're trying to do anything we can do to win, it's not about how you play the game. It's not building good character. It's about winning and only winning.
Mm-hmm.
And that means everyone else losing. So now there's this idea of like dominance that I would say is more negative than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even when you are on top, you're worried because you look at the world as if they're trying to take your throne.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that just doesn't benefit everybody in the long run, you know? And again, yeah, just the games thing. I thought I like the research that you were talking about because I don't think I've come across that, but that is really cool. Just the idea of like the subordinate not like not participating at some point. You know, it's losing so much that all of a sudden it's like, well, this isn't even fun anymore. It's like, well, what's you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, that was good.
Thank you. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you said, like when you're winning for the sole sake of winning and for your own selfish hedonistic benefit. That is how social structures take that tilt towards tyranny. And that is where um, the creative and innovative types um, are necessary to have so that they can update the structure so that it doesn't tyrannize people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think you have any more thoughts, concluding thoughts on that? That's all I have.
I just like the idea of like just that Peterson does. It's almost like he allows you to look at where you are and whether it's a hierarchy or um, your place of employment, wherever you are. I feel like the ideas that he gets across in his first chapter allow you to reflect in a way that's more objective, and it kind of allows you to get out of your subjective, it's all about me, I'm the victim, and these kind of mentalities that manifest, and you start questioning things almost again for what they really are based on for how you were perceiving them recently or prior to that. And again, like you brought up the server, and it's like the server was able to change his life around when he started being um when he started being honest about his position within that place of employment, right? And it's like that's one of the hardest things I think to do is to be honest about that. It's to say to yourself, like, to say to yourself, I'm a beginner, right? And so he has this whole section on the utility of the fool. And the fool is the person that understands the value of being the beginner all over again, or just just in general, and just taking the position of I don't know this. I don't know that. And yeah, I'm starting over again, and I'm not going to be the person that acts like I know it. Like you have nothing to gain from that. So again, just two questions I think are great for anybody to reflect on based on that utility of the fool section is he brings up humility. And I just wrote down, it's like, well, what does it mean to exercise humility? And basically what I was just saying is just acknowledging that in some cases you don't know and that you're not the authority and that you have a lot to learn. And I think if people can ask themselves that question, they can begin to understand their position within whatever game that they're playing or whatever hierarchy that they're a part of. And then the other one was gratitude, and just thinking in what ways do I exercise gratitude, because I think that's again something that can kind of just humble you. Um, so again, I love that chapter too, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've definitely like hit on all the points of the first chapter in a roundabout way, but yeah, I don't know. I would just say like I know we're going to talk about every chapter, and it might be this way. It's almost hard to because I don't want to just reiterate everything that he said
Mm-hmm.
in his exact order. But yeah, I think we're just hitting on a lot of the ideas, and I think it's just, if anything, if people care to listen to this, it's just food for thought. And if this is something that we can post, post questions, ask for us to clarify anything that wasn't we didn't really get across too clear, or if you were just questioning it, or if you have a different perspective or something that you feel like you could even debate, um you know, post, share, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
Comment. Well, oh, including thought. Um, the fool, that gratitude, that humility. Um, if it is embodied, um, Young regarded as the precursor to what he called the Redeemer, or eventually the hero, and the one, because in that humility and gratitude comes acceptance of where you are, like you said, and allows you to receive and take in and integrate information and wisdom from those who have already trotted along the path. and allow you to go further the path that they have made and help everybody else out in the end, including yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
Awesome.
I
Well,
think that's a good way
I
to
think
finish.
without a doubt. Well, Keith, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
And until chapter 2, well, I guess we have Young's first chapter first on dream analysis. That'll be a
Yeah.
good one. Tune in.
Well, yeah, definitely. Episode 1 in the books.
Let's go.